Hi, this is Tony Ruggiero. Thanks for listening to The Tour Coach. These are the players, coaches, experts, stories, and insights from my work on the PGA Tour at my retreats or my downtown teaching center in Mobile, Alabama. My goal is to shed light and share insights from the people who I've gotten to know and meet working on the PGA Tour and teach it through my career. And I hope this helps all of us play, coach, and teach better golf. If you like what you hear, please give us a good review and take a look at our new Dew Sweepers YouTube channel or the Dew Sweeper on Instagram, where I've taken some time to share videos of help from my teachings, travels, and journeys. For this edition of our Golf Coaches Forum, got the regular suspects, Justin Parsons, Wayne Flint, Jackson Court joining me. But today I thought it would be great to have join us. He's become a good friend of mine. He does an unbelievable job in the media and promoting instruction. He's the instruction editor of Golf Magazine, golf.com. Luke Kerr-Dineen. Luke, thanks for sitting in and joining us.
Oh, please. Thanks for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
So we've been getting, I know Justin, I think Wayne, you guys, we've all had this, we're getting lots of, I've had tons of direct messages, emails, people that thank us for doing this, young teachers, particularly that are for putting out this information. One of the things I kind of wanted to ask you, you were a really good player. You've been around instruction. For these young teachers coming up, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of pick your brain for what you see, how the world of the instructor is evolving and changing over the years. Obviously, we've been doing it a long time, or some have been doing it longer. But, for these young teachers, maybe talk a little bit about how you see the world of instruction is changing. And then maybe we could talk a little bit about the things that from a person in the media that you look for, like things that young teachers can do to get themselves noticed, to draw attention to themselves, other than obviously teach good players and be good at it, but kind of shed some light on things that these up and coming and that teachers can do.
Yeah, so I guess from my perspective, I always come at this from like a bit of a player's perspective, because I'm not a coach and would be an atrocious one if I was, but I'm just, college player and still play recreationally. And, so from my experience in this industry, I found that, when I was a junior golfer, it was all about like throwing up a video of Nick Faldo and trying to hit positions, and that was really it. Like the closer you were, the better you're going to be. And that's kind of it. Very much like in response to the video camera technology that was front and center at that time, right? And then what I've noticed over the years, and especially being really close to it now in my role at golf.com and Golf Magazine, is that it's all become a lot more like personalized. People, coaches, you guys are on the cutting edge of so many different things. And now you ask questions like, what can your body do? Where are your physical limitations? How can we address those? And if not, how can we tailor a move around what you physically can do? And I think you guys, the proof's in the pudding, right? Like it's amazing the way you guys can look at a player, do adjustments, squeak a few extra miles per hour and get them hitting it better and, turning them into a better player really quickly. And then, in both the short term and then the longer term sort of development plan that goes along with that. I think from a media perspective, it's like a double-edged sword because, when a coach has a method, like this is the ideal swing, and it's very simple and that's easy to like convey to like a large audience of people. This is my method. It's called this. This is what you need to do. And if you do all of it, if you check all those boxes, you'll play the golf of your dreams. Like coaching is more complex than that. It seems like nowadays, right? So I think the challenge from a media perspective is trying to convey the messiness of like tailoring your approach to players, but trying to make that in a way that's simple to the guy who's just scrolling through Instagram, coming onto golf.com. That's really like, I think the North Star where we should be aiming at. And, as media people, and my advice to any coaches, like, if you can give the student on the other end of this a little better understanding of what you're trying to do, then you've won. It doesn't mean you need to explain everything all at once. It just means you're trying to get that ball moving a little bit further. You're trying to get them moving a little bit more towards the goalposts every time they kind of interact with you.
Justin, I'll ask you to comment on this. I think that's one of the things I learned early on. Like I watched young teachers when I was crazy young, and Wayne, you remember, I had this urge I remember my old mentor said I didn't need to tell everything I knew about the golf swing in the first 15 minutes of the lesson. But that's kind of how I was. I'd wanted to impress somebody because they were paying for a lesson. But I think the art of teaching, and as you get better, is you realize that you're trying to tell them as little as possible and get the job done.
There's no doubt about that. Anytime, referring back to Luke's points, anytime I ever get bogged down into thinking that something has to be done in one specific way, forgive my French, but it bites me in the ass. At some point it bites me in the ass, and it's such, it's just such an individual. It's such an individual sport, and somebody said to me once, if you were ever told or critiqued as a teacher that you're complicated, it's never meant as a compliment. Whereas if somebody says, "Oh yeah, Tony stuff's really simple," that's almost always meant as a compliment, because it means that whatever you've said, they've understood and they've been able to do it, and it hasn't made them feel like they're awash with different thoughts and things. Which, as we know, we can't be there when we're playing golf anyway. So, to Luke's point, I think we probably need to do a better job of kind of subdividing. And I said to you, Tony, when we were having one of our chats, the training element of the sport and the preparation element of the sport and the performance element of the sport, and making sure that people understand, exactly where they are within those three elements. And the performance nature of the sport should not contain a lot of swing thoughts and a lot of different ideas. And the performance element of the sport is the same as going out to play a game of tennis or a game of soccer or a game of baseball. You're there to perform, and you're there to try and, in our case, shoot the lowest score possible. And when you're doing that, all you're trying to do is hit good golf shots, and you're not really thinking about a great deal of mechanical things anyway. So I think sometimes the world of golf instruction gets almost polarized from the world of performance. And that's something I think that has probably not stood us in good stead as teachers over the years.
I love that. And I was going to get you guys to comment on, I think one of the things I've tried to do and find is that I've tried to understand what my weaknesses are, the areas that I'm not very strong. And I've tried to surround myself with people that are good at those things, because I noticed that as I was going along in my career, after I'd kind of gone on my own, that there were things in the science and in the biomechanics and maybe in fitness that I wasn't near as, I didn't have a clue about or as good. But I realized that that's where our business was going. If you were going to develop players and you were going to develop really, you wanted to coach at that level. So I think that one of the things people could do, and Luke, if you don't mind talking about what you see out there, but is surrounded, I see more people, and I know, JP, you've got them at Sea Island. I mean, there's people you work with that are good at different, on the fitness side. And I see more people blending other talents with them so that they can offer more to a student, or so that they can help figure out whatever it is the person's missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And I think to bring it back to 2 points, or rather to frame this, your average golf magazine reader is 12 handicap, plays all the time, kind of has a fleeting knowledge of golf instruction stuff. So may have heard the words early extension, may know what that one means, but may at the same time think strong grip is gripping firm, so there's some real they just don't know that there's not a huge deep knowledge set that they're working with. Some of them want to commit to bigger overhauls in areas of their game, and other ones just want to play a little bit better tomorrow. So I think if that's the context with where Golf Magazine content deals with, how do you help that guy? I think it comes down to two things. The first is helping them self-diagnose. This is the thing that sort of keeps me up at night sometimes, where if a guy's hitting pushes or hitting blocks and thinking that they're hitting slices because the ball's going right and everything that goes right is a slice, and they see a tip that's how to eliminate your slice, get shallow or whatever, and they I need to get more shallow. That golf is gonna get worse, right? So being able to give that golfer the tools to self-diagnose what they're seeing with their game, and then either look for the right certain kind of content because of it, or make the adjustments on their own. That to me is something that I think coaches are indispensably important for, right? Being able to help a player understand golf and what they're seeing in their own games is hugely important. And then along those lines, sometimes they may, hit the ball pretty good. They know their tendencies. They know how to hit it straight, but they may just be doing user error type stuff, right? They may struggle with alignment. They may struggle with a routine that gets them in the correct posture, consistently. They may struggle with knowing how to practice their wedge. So I think that's going back to JP's sort of performance thing, right? Like giving somebody like a framework for how they should practice is like, that's not as the traditional golf instruction stuff, like, oh, hit this position. But that is content that we actually see hitting on golf.com and Golf Magazine all the time. Like giving somebody like, hey, this is something you should do if you have 20 minutes on the range, and almost treat it like a recipe that you're going to cook a meal from. Like, try this, do this, hit different targets, hit different shots. Like that, I think, is something there's a real appetite for out there.
I think that people that we just assume, some teachers assume that the student knows as much as we do, right? Like that they know about pre-shot routine, or they know how to aim, or they know about those, or they know how their grip's supposed to be and things like that. And people jump into these more complicated things, and you start to see them talk about wrist angles and all these things. And whereas, you're talking about the 12 handicapper that loves to play, that hits a slice. I mean, they need all of the basic stuff that, sometimes we overlook. Like even explaining low point. I see teachers not explain stuff like that in the beginning. And then 4 lessons down the road, the student starts talking about how they tried to get under the ball or something like that, and it's like, well, they never really understood what the concept was in the first place.
Yeah, in some ways it's funny because some people will say like, the worst thing you can do is like see how a pro player plays golf and then relate that to the amateur golfer. I mean, and like, I get it. It's true. But in some ways, there's more overlap than you think. Because when I see you guys out there working with a tour player, fine-tuning them right before a tournament, like in some ways, that's kind of like the average golfer needs a dose of the basics, fine-tuning the little things, the stuff in their setup, in how they should practice, like how they should improve their chips, how they should think about playing a certain hole. This is stuff that like recreational golfers who play all the time, like is pretty front and center to their like golf experience, right? So I do think it's something that is, there's a lot of value there.
JP, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, when you speak to guys like Luke, and he's kind of got his finger in the pulse with what the public need and what the average golfer, he was saying about a 12 handicapper. It's interesting. It does go more towards the performance place, how to get a ball around the golf course, how to work, the Vision 54 ladies out in Arizona, that, that kind of thing is such workable information. Whereas, being able to get into more flexion in your left wrist and transition is just something that's really cool. And we all would love to be able to be athletic and be like Xander Schauffele in our transition. But, that's not to say we can all do that. But I guess what we can do going around to it is to figure out the best way for us to be able to play golf with the way that we swing and the way that we can play our ball flights, our strengths and our weaknesses. And, I think for the coaches listening, I think being able to kind of leave an area in your brain for that type of information, for like, okay, let's take something that's very imperfect and try and do our best with it. And generally speaking, when you're working with recreational golfers, I think that approach is probably quite well received.
No, I agree. Wayno, what do you think?
One thing I try to do with all of my students, I try to get them to understand the 1 or 2 things that are really, really important for their golf game. I mean, because there's so much information that's out there, and it's great information. And I love my people to be involved in it and, check out all the YouTube and everything. But I try to, get them onto the 1 or 2 things and understand why it's really, really important for them to work on the 1 or 2 things and what those things will do to enhance their game and push their game forward, and it's amazing to me, how people will, run down another rabbit hole on some stuff that they really don't need to worry about sometimes. I mean, they're clearly not maybe good enough to do that. Recreational golfers are not good enough to do that, and nor do they need to try to do it. Sometimes they need to maybe work on their left-hand grip, things like that. I had a conversation today with one of my better players, and he's out playing in Colorado and didn't have the type of day he wanted to have. And, a couple text messages later, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I just picked the phone up and called him because he was he was spiraling not very well, as we've all had that happen, with good players. And it was amazing, just a simple 5-minute conversation and saying, Patrick, this is your tendencies, and these are things that you've done for a long time. And I think if we get back to the simple thing of making your setup really good and getting the ball in the right place, and you've tended to always do some stuff where you just lift your arms and you really don't turn your body very well, and it sounds to me like that's what's happening to you. And let's go out there and commit to just trying to put everything together very simply and try to do a couple things that we've done in the past that have worked. And lo and behold, 10 minutes later, I get a text back. Wow, what a session. It's been great the last few minutes. What a crazy game. And, little things that can really make a big difference if a person truly understands what their swing is and what their game is, and I think that goes for, a 20 handicapper, a 12 handicapper, a 4 handicapper, and guys that are, trying to get their card, and maybe even, more guys that have their card, right? You guys, JP, you and Tony see that more than I do. I'm not out there as much right now because I've had guys in the past, but don't have a person right now with any status on the PGA Tour. And, I think it goes right across the board with everybody. So I try to really clear it up in the person's mind. Like Luke was saying, let them understand what they do and what their tendencies are. And I try to make that very clear to the people. And I try to do that going, back to the first question. I try to do that very simply. I try to not get too many complex things going on, and, something a person can take away and work on, and, have their good weekend at the club and play some good golf and get a lot better, as the time goes on.
I'd be interested, Tony, just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
And when we talk about it, like you and I and Wayne and and Jax, we talk about it. It's clear that for the younger coaches, you want to try and treat these people like gold dust as they are, and like individuals, and you want to try and bring them forward. And Wayne's lifting the phone and talking to his clients, and you've talked about the little comment cards, and I use Coach Now. We're trying to connect everything, and from Luke's perspective, then, and from the young teachers, it's like, I think there's quite an onus on like having an Instagram profile. Like I remember a couple of years ago deleting my Twitter handle because I just didn't like the platform anymore, thinking I was going to delete Instagram as well. And then somebody said, in the United States, Instagram is your kind of like golf instruction business card. Mm-hmm. So, I'd be interested to know from Luke's perspective, from I know I'm not going to ask him about like how a younger coach would need to develop, but just like how he would see the profile on Instagram and how to develop that, and how that might link in with what coaches are doing.
Yeah. So I think like anytime you can use your Instagram to get closer audience is like a really good thing. And I feel like coaches always come out better the other end. So like, Justin, like you do a bunch of those Q&As, right? You'll fire them off. And like, I know I've written them up for golf.com because they're so good. But like, and I don't know if you're surprised at some of the questions that come in, but to me, that's like a great example of like, wow, like, these questions start flooding in from students. And sometimes they're like quite like complex on a tactical level. Like, what should we do? And then other times they're like a little more basic, like, how, I don't know, there's like a basic posture question. So I like stuff like that. One of the things I always find interesting is that, like, I think sometimes you guys forget maybe how interesting some of the stuff you're doing is, because you're just like making magic all the time on the lesson tee. But like, if you have a student, like sometimes like a student will see themselves in other students, right? And they'll say, oh, that's me. So if you're on the range with somebody, and whether it's a tour player who's struggling with certain kinds of chips, or, and 15 handicap who's, maybe looking for a bit more distance, and you're trying to help them turn. Like that's, that may seem like a bog standard lesson to you, but that's really interesting stuff, I think, to a lot of people in the right dosage. So like, being able to like even get in a situation where, you're videoing a student of yours doing a drill, and then you explain it in the caption, and then you get into a habit of doing this, daily, once a day or something, or multiple times, a few times a week. That's like more, I think there's like you'll get traction that way, because it's like you're like explaining a little corner of golf that the golfer doesn't sort of know already. So I think there's like real value in that. And in some ways that shows you guys in like the light where you feel probably most comfortable in, which is, you know, your coaches, and you're showing the world you're coaching. You're not having to get in front of a camera and, you know, like say some, 2-minute diatribe about like, do this, do that, where you may not feel comfortable. You can like very much operate in your element of like, today I'm helping this slicer get better. And this is a job that helps, you know?
And Luke, real quick, sorry, because a lot of the guys are younger, and would you recommend them to do reels? Would you recommend them to do, to put some music to it? And I see a lot of that. I don't do that because I'm kind of getting a bit ancient, boring. But the guys watching are probably thinking, well, what's the best way for me to connect it up?
I'm getting you on TikTok, Parsons.
Right.
So every now and again, Instagram will roll out a new platform like Reels. And then every time they do, they'll boost the engagement for that new product that they're trying to get out there. So Reels is relatively new. Like right now on golf.com, we see that anytime we do a Reels, it hits disproportionately harder than if we were to do a regular Instagram post, because Instagram is trying to like encourage users to do that. That's like a quick hack in some ways. When something new comes out, the sooner you adopt it, the more, you can sort of
the more you'll get.
Exactly. I think in a nutshell, if you divide it down by like, Reels is for 15-second content, Stories is for 30-second content, and Instagram posts are for like, 1.5-2 minute type content. The upside of Reels is that, and Stories is that it will keep you in people's psyche like more, basically. So, if I do a story a day, it's almost like, I'll see Justin's or Tony's like Instagram profile pop up in my feed a little more. And then that may drive me then to the rest of his profile. You won't get that if you're just posting on your profile. So I think my general advice is to be like, I would probably try to do a couple stories, maybe like 1 or 2 stories a day, just to kind of to provide a snapshot into your life on the lesson tee, just so you can kind of continue populating people's feeds, keep getting
the story's the one on the top, right?
There's one on the top, exactly. Yeah. And then
thanks, Jackson. Don't laugh at me.
And then the Instagram post itself, that would be like for if you're trying to get a point across, or share something.
No, that's fantastic. And I, to me, your Instagram is almost replaced like your website. Like almost you don't necessarily, I remember when we'd go to teaching summits and they had people come in, this before you, Luke, and they'd talk to us about building our websites and all that. Like to me, I get more people that come to me and ask questions. And I think people get kind of a taste of what you're like in a lesson from your Instagram. And I get a lot of people, not a lot, but I get people that come to me because they say they like the stuff that they saw. And another thing I would say is I think you want your Instagram or the stuff you to put out to be like what your lesson is and like how you act and to be authentic. I don't think you want to be different than try to be something you're not on regular lesson.
Totally agree with that. You'll just come across as inauthentic, and like what you see is that there are multiple different kinds of people who resonate on social media just because they're being who they are, The only thing that maybe should keep an eye on is like, it's like pick one point and try to make it well in like your content, because you guys know, you guys have forgotten more about the golf swing than I know, right? But like when you're talking about a minute or 30 seconds or 15 seconds, like you're trying to make one point succinctly and clearly.
Very good.
Jackson, you got any questions?
Nothing from the crowd yet. If people want to throw out some questions, we can definitely ask them.
Somebody texted me one. Hold on. One of the questions was, like how media can be used in a good way. And I think from teachers, what you just talked about was the way we can use it in a positive way. But I also think, like Wayne, you touched on it. I love students coming to me with articles or with videos and stuff from golf.com or whoever, because I think it shows that they're thinking. And then I've turned on and I've found drills. I've stolen some of JP's stuff before. He probably doesn't know it. I'm not afraid to steal something from somebody.
Damn it.
And so I think that as a resource for a student, it's fantastic because I think it gets them thinking about getting better. And then if you do a good job explaining why you've got them working on what you have, and explain why this tip either is good for you or is not good for you, it builds credibility.
That's something, Tony, that, again, Luke could probably kind of help us with. I did a lot of videos back in Dubai times. We did a lot of videos with, instructional videos. And I remember Claude was, working a little bit with Greg Rose and Dave Phillips and doing, let's do this 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Learn to be able to present and learn to be able to speak on a video. And like Luke said, deliver your content. I'd be interested to know again from Luke's side, like how important that would be for a young teacher coming up to be able to get comfortable doing that and get comfortable in front of the camera and get posting, even some videos where he's not necessarily or she's not necessarily with a client, but just explaining some things and explaining some points. Yeah,
it's a really good point, JP, because like I would definitely recommend like getting in front of a camera as soon as possible, because look, that it's not like if you're naturally good on camera, we'll always do stuff with you, and if you're not, we won't. Like, it doesn't work like that. We'll help. We'll help everyone basically. But like, the more comfortable you are on camera, the more content like we can do from our perspective. It just becomes easier for everyone, right? Like, it's less of your time, it's more content, you get more bang for your buck in that respect. So yeah, I would say like definitely get used to like doing reps. Some tips I would provide when it comes to that is like, don't try to do too much with one thing. So for instance, like, and Instagram can be a good training platform in this, but if you're trying to make one point well on Instagram, that's really the priority. Like, don't try to focus on making that as clearly and succinctly as possible without spiraling off into like a variety of other directions, because you can always do like more content following up content on that. Like you could do a video series, for instance, about like starting with the posture, moving to the takeaway, moving to mid-back swing, whatever it is. So, but I think like the value there is like if a user on the other end who doesn't know, that 12 handicap golf magazine reader can walk away with that with like just a slightly clearer understanding of what you're trying to say, that's key, because you're not trying to get them to understand the entire golf swing in 30 seconds. You're trying to get them to understand, you're trying to raise their golfing IQ like a little bit in 30 seconds. So that's what I think is really important. But yeah, back to your point, JP, like kind of comes down to reps in some ways. Like I always found for me, like everyone has to find their own process with this. I've always found it helps to write down like a few key points that I know I want to hit. Like some people like reading from a script. I don't personally, but I know if I want to hit like this key point, that key point, this key point, then like, I'll like actually go through the process of writing that down, then like speak in front of a camera, and that helps me format it in my brain a little bit more without feeling too scripted. And then the only other piece of advice I would say is that, like really taking a conscious effort to like up the energy anytime you're in front of a camera is really important. Even though you'll feel maybe a little goofy doing it at first, like they've done studies on this and they found that, so something like a norm, there are all these little cues that humans do that when you put them in, that when you put a camera in between them and the person on the other end, for whatever reason, those little cues get stripped away. So like speaking at your normal level will actually seem like you're speaking at a slightly less energetic level. So you kind of have to get to like 120% of what you actually are just to be coasting around your normal energy level. So yeah, right. You really got to like up the energy, up the intensity a little bit more. And even though you may feel like I feel a little goofy doing this, it's like you're not going to come across as goofy. So yeah, that's just something to keep an eye on.
Brilliant. Thank you, Luke.
So we talked about, like you talked about how teachers can use social media. What about the students, the 12 handicappers? If you were advising 12, 15 handicappers how to use social media to get better at golf, what would you tell other than go to golf.com?
I would say like try to understand what the teacher on the other end is getting you to do. I mean, that's the big thing, I think, for me, that a lot of students struggle. They struggle with self-diagnosing, and, they'll see all these teachers online and they will not entirely understand, like, what the gist is. Like, what are they trying to get them to do? In some ways, that's why you see a guy like a friend of mine, like George Gankas. That's one of the reasons why he resonates, is because people get, like, what he's trying to do, right? Like, they're like, oh, hit this, like, this is a good matchup for you. This is a good position for you. And, like, it's very clear what, like, you know, what George was trying to get you to do, like shallowing the club, for instance.
Right.
I'm not saying it's good or bad at all. I'm just saying, like, I think he does a good job at like keeping like as what he's trying to get students to do simple. So that's what I think that students are looking for when students are looking through social media. I would say, like, what's the guy on the other end trying to get you? Like, what is his like point of reference exactly? You know, is he trying to get you to swing a certain way? Is he trying to help you practice? Is he trying to help you understand your body? Is he trying to give you like specific drills, you know, and like seek out stuff that, you know, seek out those kind of.
That's great. That's gold right there. Jackson, we got any questions, or do we need to let Luke go to tee off? I mean, Luke, are you caddying now?
I'm not. I just grabbed my sticks and I'm going to link up with a friend of mine who's on the back nine.
Jackson, you got any questions for us before we depart?
There was a question about addressing trauma with players and how the coaches do that, but I think we've touched on that in some previous forums. So I think we should thank Luke for coming on and doing this. This was really helpful. I know I picked up some great nuggets as well. Man, it was really good.
Luke, awesome stuff. Thanks as always for, you know, when I text, your most high maintenance top 100 guy here, bothering you all the time. Thanks for always returning the text and for taking the time to sit in with us today and help some folks.
Oh, please.
Brilliant,
Thank you. Thank you for thinking of me. And anytime you guys need anything, obviously, like I talk to Tony all the time, Justin all the time. So like anytime you guys need anything, just don't hesitate to reach out.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.
JP, Wayno, Jackson, talk to y'all later.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, boys.
Guys, appreciate everybody sitting in. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Tour Coach. I want to take a minute and thank Cordy Walker and Golf Science Lab, as well as my sponsors Srixon, Buick, Bushnell, and Vineyard Vines for helping make all of this possible and helping me share my insights with you. If you like what you've heard, why don't you check out more on the Dew Sweepers channel on YouTube, as well as the Dew Sweeper on Instagram, or go to dewsweepersgolf.com to find out more about my teaching, my travels, and where you can find out more about me.